Welcome to SciFi 2021. I'm Nisha Holla, visiting fellow at the Observer Research Foundation and moderator of this exciting panel on frontier technologies. Frontier technologies represent the next generation of technologies that can potentially disrupt and fundamentally rewire business strategies, environmental practices, and employment frameworks. These include, but are not limited to, artificial intelligence, life sciences innovation, new materials innovation, and quantum computing. Often, these emerging technologies sit at the intersection of multiple rapidly evolving technology vectors. Now, sustainability is one of the biggest impact sectors for frontier technologies. Frontier technologies can help anticipate and respond to the effects of climate hazards and air pollution through the adoption of state of the art technologies to address environmental impacts. Another significant impact field for technology is in driving inclusion. Inclusion technology, along with sustainability, are enabling millions to lead more fruitful lives. So, with that context, our panel today examines frontier technologies in the context of sustainability and inclusion tech. Our superstar panelists are subject matter experts on everything from development and deployment of frontier technologies to policymaking and the connection to the UN Sustainable Development Goals, or SDGs. So, our panelists today are Dr. Ezhil Subbian. She's co-founder and chief executive officer at String Bio. Welcome, Ezhil. Ms. Sowmya Balendiran is co-founder and chief business officer of C6 Energy. Welcome, Sowmya. Our panelists have global experience in this space, making for quite an exciting discussion. So without further ado, we'll start with Errol. Errol, how do we utilize scientific development to reconfigure sustainable resource delivery for 7 billion people and reduce the impact on the environment?
Hi. Thanks, Nisha. Thanks for having us on the panel. And very, very interesting question, right? And with very broad implications, especially given today's scenario. So let's start with the basics, right? I think basic requirements, if you see for the 7 billion population today or the projected 10 billion population, would be food, health, clean living, right? Let's say those are the basics, and then everything else comes after that. I think for each of these areas, there are multiple solutions, right? In terms of where we can leverage scientific developments to bring to market better resources that can have a significant impact. I'll start with food. I think since that's close to the heart for us. Now, when you talk about food and across the entire value chain, right? How we grow and produce, to how we transport food, to how we sell in the marketplace, to how we consume. I think there are innovations in each of these spheres that are currently being looked at. I'll use our example from String and talk about how we have some solutions that can impact here, right? Like, so if I look at the front end of this value chain and you talk about how we grow food, we have a class of products now, crop inputs that are made using greenhouse gas that can make a significant impact in terms of soil fertility, better quality produce, clean food for the consumer using non-chemical inputs. And we are one of many in the marketplace today, right? If I look at another example, let's say on the consumer side, we have another product which is an alt protein product, right? If you look at protein today, how we farm, one of the largest greenhouse gas emitters, fish meal used in the aqua industry, significant impact on oceans, soy that goes into the animal farming industry, significant impact in terms of deforestation. So one solution that we have, alt protein, can now bring protein, a very key macro ingredient, to this 7 billion population with a significant impact in terms of sustainability, right? So I think if you look at, and that's just looking at food and two areas of focus. Similarly, let's say if you look at health, right? I mean, 2021, we cannot talk about health without talking about the pandemic. But I'm not going to talk about vaccines. Let's take video conferencing, what we're doing right now. Huge scientific development, big impact in terms of how we communicate, but also a lot more sustainable. Right now, I live in Bangalore. Just video conferencing has made a huge impact in terms of air quality around us. So I think there's many solutions that we can leverage. Step one, I think, is for us to open up our minds and say, what are better ways in how we live, how we consume better than what we're doing today, right? That can make a significant impact in terms of sustainability.
Wonderful. Thanks, Errol. Now, Sowmya, moving towards the ocean economy, right? The ocean economy is becoming increasingly central to economic growth in so many countries. And in your experience, how do we keep sustainability as a central tenet while promoting ocean activities?
Oh, that's a very good question, Nisha. And so I'm going to take a little bit of what Errol mentioned, right? See, all of us know this. We're going to be a 9 billion people in 2050. That's not very far away. And when we talk about sustainability being the core piece to take us moving forward, fundamentally what's happened is 70% oceans. And so far, we have hardly made any sort of an exploration or use of that. And all our activities have been primarily focused on land. So what is happening is there's a lot more stress on land with the increasing population, need for more food production. The more and more pressure that we put on developing activities in land and not looking at the oceans, we're already walking away from a sustainable possibility for the future. So that's how C6 also got started. We said, let's not try and do more where the pressure is already lying. Can we look at something else? And that's when we started looking at the oceans and seaweeds, to be specific. And like you rightly said, a lot of countries today are starting to look at the oceans as a possibilities, and specifically seaweed itself, is picking up a lot of traction. A whole bunch of governments have come in. The US had launched a huge program just to explore the possibilities of seaweeds on multiple applications, right? From agriculture to feed production, your plastics replacements, and even biofuels. So how do we make this sustainable? Now that's the key thing. When we start something, one thing is to get started on a journey, and the second thing is to make sure that it stays and it produces results over multiple years. I think that's where this conversation is becoming more and more important. So one of the things that we have realized is even farming the seaweeds, for example, there are multiple kinds. There are certain kinds which we call as wildly grown. You can just go, they grow on the ocean beds, you harvest them. And then there are these other kinds of seaweeds where you cultivate it. You actually place and then they grow and then you
Right.
harvest. So now between the two, obviously, a cultivation method is much better. Possibilities to some seaweeds which are more cultivatable. That way, while scaling up, you're not looking at removing what's already there in the oceans, but rather you're actually planting it, capturing the carbon, and then taking them and converting into products. So thereby, you're leaving a very green and a sustainable process in the whole
Mhm.
piece. So this is just one example. There are multiple other examples like this. People are starting to look at mining the oceans. Now there are multiple things you need to be very very careful about these things. One side is, can we use this as an economic opportunity, but at the other side you should make sure the life below water is not impacted by it, and what kind of systems you can put in place for that. So I think oceans are a great possibility. Certainly, it is something that could take a lot of pressure off the land itself, which is in shortage, especially in developing countries like us. But making sure there is a sustainable environment around it, the processes are green, that's going to be the key. So everybody needs to think about it a little bit. And from C6's perspective, at least we've started looking at it as what is a cultivatable variety, so that we're not we're trying to make it more
Great to hear, Soumya. Thank you. Errol, now increasingly sustainability best practices are becoming more mainstream, which is great news for all of us. What are some significant market trends in your experience?
So one of the clear trends, right, that I've been surprised about personally is actually just the traction in the market space today for the whole all protein sector. Just in the last, I would say maybe 24 months, I feel like the conversations we're having around alternate sources of protein, I think, has significantly changed. In fact, at String, we thought that we would be here, let's say, 5 years down the road. And in fact, this
Okay.
was one of the reasons why we focused our product largely on the animal nutrition sector first before looking at human nutrition. But unfortunately, thanks to the pandemic, I think the conversation has picked up a lot of traction. And interestingly, from the market end, the technologies are being pulled to be commercialized, right? Rather than, us as a technology provider pushing these solutions into the marketplace, which I think is a significant difference. And another trend, I would say, Nisha, and something that I think is very relevant for the conversation here, is just in the last 12 months, I do see a lot more conversation around how to quantify sustainability, right? Because I think there's so many algorithms, so many ways to do this, that I think we are finally starting to put some momentum there to say, okay, what does this mean, right? What does a plant coming up in India mean versus a plant coming up in China mean? And I think that conversation is also emerging thanks to the focus on sustainability. I think this is definitely the what I'm seeing. And I think the other big trend very closely related to this is also around the digitization aspect, I would say, particularly with regards to food production, right? I think two key aspects. One, both in terms of saying let's quantify how we are producing, right? What is being put in, what is coming out, the seasonality, variability. But the second, also in terms of the logistics coming from your farm to fork. I think there's been a significant push here, rightfully so. Unfortunately, in the ag sector, for folks like me, I would like to see a lot more investments come into the upstream, right? In terms of your inputs, in terms of seed, in terms of plants, but we'll take what we get. I think there is a lot of investments that are coming in into the downstream end of things, which hopefully will translate into upstream. But I also see this as a big trend that's happening, particularly in markets like India.
Wonderful. We would all love to see more investment in this sector. I'm sure Soumya also agrees with you. Now, uh, Soumya, developing tech is one thing, deploying and scaling it up is a whole other beast. So, what has been your experience with deploying and scaling up frontier technologies?
I think, yeah, it's certainly a very, very, very painful and a persistent journey. I think that's probably the precise way you could put that. Like you see, you rightly mentioned making a product on a lab scale or as a pilot product is great. You could. It's almost like making an art. You can take a rice and make a beautiful art out of it at one piece. But now try doing the same thing over 100,000 pieces. That's where the whole thing is. And especially in frontier technologies, it becomes much more difficult because you're trying to establish everything for the first time. Right from making the product, testing your consumers, and also ensuring the entire supply chain is robust. To give you an example, when we go back, I think 7, 8 years into our, when we started some of the concepts, we wanted to make this Seco mine. Today, it's on the coast of Bali, but we didn't even have people to talk to, on how do you get something like this fabricated. And India being a non-seafaring nation, the knowledge was just not available here. So we actually had to reach out to global networks, get people in. So when you're developing a frontier technology, I think the key in making differences is making sure you connect to a global network of audience, especially it could be anything. It could be consultants, it could be your partners, and ensuring that right from the beginning you've thought to the whole process. Because the other issue which comes up in scaling up is, and this is something that we thankfully, we had people in the team who had gone through and scaled up the processes. It's on the waste as well. When you make a product, a 1 liter of product, imagine it generates just 10% waste discharge. But then you need to think through, if I'm going to make 1 million liters of the same thing, a 10% of that is huge. And disposing that becomes really difficult. So our experience at least has been in scaling up something from the lab to a final product at a large scale. It needs meticulous planning on all these fronts, right? From I could get one piece today, but the question is the same. You keep asking it over and over again. I want to do this today with this product. Can I get the same thing 1,000 times over again? can I get the same quality 1,000 times over again? So it's from the drawing board, and if you cannot identify the suppliers for that, if you cannot identify places to do that, you chuck that idea, however amazing it is. So these have been some of the learnings, and I feel that if you really want to make global solutions at a very, very large scale, these have to be thought through at a drawing board level. Otherwise, it just gets difficult to change it in between and make it up later.
Absolutely. Thanks,
So
Sowmya.
that is how I.
Wonderful. Thank you. Errol, how does frontier technology development drive the achievement of SDGs or Sustainable Development Goals?
Interesting question. Easier to answer how it doesn't. But I mean, I think somebody very famous and close to all of us, right, said that we cannot solve problems with the same thinking that we used when we created them. So, which fundamentally says that if we want to achieve the sustainable development goals, we need to look at the solutions from a very, very different perspective, right? I think that's where frontier technologies have a very clear role to play. Because I think it feels like we are very clearly at the inflection point in terms of the impact that we as a society have had on the world around us, right? In fact, I was joking about SST exam right before, right? I was just looking at when the first big civilization came up, and it's just 5,000 years back. If you think about the impact we've had on the environment around us in the last 5,000 years, it's scary. So I think very critical, very, very critical for us to see how to have or bring these technologies into play so that we can really achieve those SDG goals, right, that we set for ourselves and make a big impact in terms of um, better circularity in terms of how we live, or not better circularity, but circularity in terms of how we live. I'll talk about string since I'm very familiar with the multiple impacts that a technology like ours can have. But I think there are parallels, right, when you look at other technologies in the marketplace as well. So when we look at string, we've got alternative protein products for market. Can make a huge impact in terms of our zero hunger goals, right? Because essentially now you're able to produce protein using almost vertically, so using less land and less water, higher yield per acre. So you're able to essentially make more with less, right? Again, now we are taking a greenhouse gas like methane, converting it into protein for food and enabling circularity, enabling circular solutions. So much better production and consumption processes, right, that we are enabling here can have a direct impact in terms of climate action goals, right? And the protein replaces fish meal, so it lowers the pressure that is getting placed on the ocean systems today. So it can have a significant impact in terms of life below water. And essentially you're bringing cleaner, traceable food to the marketplace, can control the inputs that are going in. So essentially can have a pesticide free, silica free, bacterial contamination free, traceable protein that it can bring to the marketplace. So again, a significant impact in terms of health and well-being, right? And I'm talking about one of our products and the multiple impacts that it can have in terms of the SDGs. Right now, we've got other solutions in our kitty. We have Sowmya here, right, from C6. Again, different technology, but again, vast impact in terms of achieving our SDGs. So I think we have to open up, and my thing would be if we can start saying, hey, sustainability and the impact we are having on the environment needs to be part of the overall equation when we evaluate any solution or any product. I think that itself will help drive the achievement towards our SDGs.
Wonderful. Thanks, Errol. Samya, how do frontier technologies in sustainability help balance environmental concerns and livelihoods?
Um, see, like you said, the whole conversation so far has been about sustainability, SDGs, right? If you look at the whole history, Nisha, every time there's been a disruptive technology or a frontier technology coming for the first time, The benefits which outflow typically is either an impact on the livelihood or on the sustainability of that particular sector, to be specific. So if we start taking our specific examples of, say, how the oceans can impact, like if we take that as one of the examples, Ezhil had mentioned about the proteins, how that can have an impact on positivity, being a frontier technology. Again, when we say oceans and seaweeds is a frontier technology, and how that can impact the sustainability and livelihoods. Um, just to give a small example, today we're talking about seaweeds being capable of giving products to improve agricultural output, the productivity of crops by about 10 to 15%. We have products which can be made from seaweed, which can be used as animal feed, the other big use of biomass. And we really don't have space to cultivate more and more biomass. And the third and another very large impact area which we're talking about is how these can be made into sustainable bioplastics. One of the biggest polluting industries in our world today is plastic pollution. And seaweeds are not just C6, there are a whole range of companies across the world trying to tackle this problem using a multitude of possibilities from seaweeds itself, which can actually be biodegradable. You don't really have to have compostings and you don't have these huge heaps. So I personally feel that particular segment itself has a huge potential in terms of how it can contribute to sustainability and the world as a center. And apart from this, also as a much longer term possibility, these can be converted into biofuels as well. And it comes to the fundamentals, right? Because everything that we do today, whether it's agriculture or feed, the food we eat, the clothing we wear, the plastics, everything is basically coming from the biomass. So that's the holy grail. You take the biomass and convert it to a whole range of products. And by going to the oceans and doing sustainable farming on the seas, now you've identified a new way to produce sustainable biomass and thereby converting that into a whole range of products. And that would impact each and every segment. That's the first part of your question. The second part is on the livelihood. Just by opening up an entire new possibilities for humans, like for example, we know that off the coast of Tamil Nadu, everybody who's doing, you go to a fisherman, what they do is they go out and fish, and that's their livelihood. And fishermen is one of the last of the hunter-gatherer systems left in the entire society today. It's literally like you go in, you might get something, you may not get something. But by doing seaweed cultivation, they have much more stable livelihoods. They know that they go plant a piece today, they are going to get an income out of it 40 days from now. And that changes that whole ecosystem, that uplifts multiple communities. And a lot of women are able to participate in it. Unlike going into the sea, for days and coming back, our society is not really equipped at this point of time to women to do that. It's mostly men. But staying on the shore and doing the cultivation, a lot of women also get to benefit out of this. And this is not just in India. Many island countries, whether it's Indonesia, Philippines, or you even look at certain Western geographies. So that way, this brings a sense of balance. Now the men and the women are contributing, the communities are stable, the livelihood options are better, while you're also trying to, the products which can come out of it can really make a difference in actually getting to the sustainability concepts.
Wonderful. Thanks, Sowmya. So now that we're drawing to the end of this panel, I have one question for all our panelists, and then you can add your closing remarks in answering that question. So, for the attainment of SDGs, it is crucial for policy, business, and technology to align. Establishing a level playing field is difficult when rules and regulations are set per country and sometimes even per industry, but the market is now global. So, what are some ideas and concepts that might drive international consensus on attaining these SDGs? And Errol, I'll start with you.
Very deep question, particularly given that we have the COP26 coming up. I think that's probably if we can figure out how to align globally on our climate goals, right? I think that in itself will set the roadmap, so to speak, on how to align globally and how national policies can then be drafted based on the global alignment, right? Because I think fundamentally, the challenge that we have today is There's the haves and the have-nots. There's there's the developed and the developing and the to be developed. And obviously, we need varying benchmarks for each of this. And I think the conversation that will happen in November is going to be very crucial to see how, as a global community, we are able to address something like this. And I believe this could be a very good roadmap. Hopefully, it all goes well for us to take forward. I'm sure it won't be perfect, but I think it will definitely give us a start. In closing, Nisha, thank you so much. I thought the questions were very deep and quite thought provoking, and great discussion with the rest of the panelists today. And look forward to the rest of the conference as well.
Yeah, I cannot agree more that it's a very important question that you asked, Nisha. See, when we talk about SDGs, there are 17 different SDGs when we speak about the whole piece, right? And driving a consensus across the world in each of this is a humongous challenge. I mean, there are a lot of effort, but I think one step at a time is probably what will get us to each of this. So making roadmaps, whether we talk about the COP summit just coming up recently, or we are talking about specific segments. I mean, each of these SDGs, I mean, there is a roadmap. People have made thought through this a lot, but just ensuring many more stakeholders are enrolled. The problem what happens is when we have these climate action plans and a developing country, there's always some sort of a non-alignment in these pieces. So ensuring there's inclusions that take care of the concerns of these countries and industries, and getting that together is probably a very, very important piece. It's very easy to say than having it getting done, but I think alignment with the industry stakeholders and the government stakeholders is going to be a very key in ensuring any of these become a successful possibility for the future. So I would say it's just conversations between multiple stakeholders in moving this forward one step at a time. And again, from my side, as closing, very, very happy to have participated in this discussion today. Thought provoking and a subject which is very close to our heart. So great speaking with all of you.
Wonderful. Thank you so much, Ezhil. Thank you so much, Sowmya.